Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm joined today by Caitlin and Keith. I'm really excited to talk to both of them and really happy to have you joining us for this conversation about impact and sustainability and how that can be done at credit unions and financial institutions, but even just driving that in small values and mission-based businesses in general and organizations. So I'll pass the proverbial mic off to our guests here to introduce themselves, and then we'll start kind of having a conversation. Caitlin, do you want to lead off here?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. My name is Caitlin Bryant, and I'm the Impact Manager at First Credit Union. And so we are located in British Columbia. We service 8 communities around the south coast of BC. And I've been in my role for about 6 years now. Over to you, Keith.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm Keith Taylor. My title is the Executive Director of the DUCA Impact Lab, which means a couple of different things. I work at DUCA Credit Union, which has been around about 70 years, has about $8 billion in assets and 19 branches across Southern Ontario. And my role at the credit union is to work with the executive team, advise on our ESG and social impact strategies and measurement work. But a bigger part of my job is to also work at an interesting subsidiary we have called the DUCA Impact Lab, which is a nonprofit innovation hub for different credit unions and community groups and other interested stakeholders to come together and collaborate on impact lending and social finance innovation opportunities for credit unions.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to learn a bit more about the Impact Lab. And I think maybe just to give people a bit more context, would love to understand kind of how impact is important to your organizations and how you individually got involved with that work and kind of what drove you to get involved with sustainability and impact.
You want to start, Caitlin?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Well, I have a background in the nonprofit sector. So when I came to First Credit Union, I was new to the credit union and financial services sector, but just really drawn to building capacity in the nonprofit sector and working with our nonprofit members in particular. But as an impact manager, I work in ESG. So I do a lot of our internal environmental responsibility work, and have led that since about 2018, when we really, through requests from members to ask, members were asking what their credit union was doing around environmental responsibility at an operational level, but also around advocacy within the communities that we serve. That really brought in that environmental piece to the work. And now, we're a little further along in that journey. We've seen lots of employees get involved in that work just because they have a personal passion in environmental sustainability and wanting to kind of update some of the operations that we have internally to be more environmentally sustainable, and also to just be measuring so that we can be driven by data in that sense. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Keith, would love to hear your journey as an organization here.
Sure. Well, I'll give you a sense. I appreciate Caitlin started with her background. It's always interesting to know what people are bringing to the roles. And in my case, I started my journey in the space. My first job really out of university was working in development finance in the Caribbean. So it was kind of looking at community ownership structures for different sorts of businesses and assets, ranging in size from, small farmers cooperatives to, repurposing failed hydroelectric projects. So, a pretty broad scope of investment. So I got my feet wet as a minion in that lending portfolio, and got to, really understand the importance of access to capital for community well-being and for moving forward. So I became interested in the space and worked in different capacities in that kind of social finance and nonprofit strategy world, and then landed at DUCA after a stint at LBG Canada, which is an audit and benchmarking program for community investment in Canada that follows the LBG methodology globally. So I've been at DUCA for about 10 years. The history of the credit union, I think, kind of tells the story in a better way than I probably could. So the history is that the credit union was started by a group of newcomers to Canada that the banks didn't want to deal with. And they still needed to bank. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have established credit. But they still needed to bank. So they created their own bank. And it's been an interesting story from that point onward. So I think in our first year, we were operating out of a living room in North York with a couple $100 on the balance sheet. And, now we're an $8 billion financial institution that, most of that trajectory was self-financed from either our operations or our membership base. So it's a really interesting, kind of community innovation story, I like to think. And as a result of that origin, our impact on the society and our impact on the communities has always been a central part of how we look at, our operations. And we want to understand, a broader range of aspects on how we impact the community, which is why we started gravitating to, wider ESG frameworks and our work with Carbonhound in particular.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing kind of the history of the credit union. And I think what I also wanted to ask is it feels like, from a values perspective, it's understood that credit unions care about their members and they care about their communities because that is who makes up the organization, right? Sort of, it's nothing without those members. And it's why we work with so many credit unions because inherently they're so dedicated to those values. So I would love to hear from both your perspectives, kind of, do you see that impact in the day-to-day with your members, and how has kind of leaning into this impact and sustainability work impacted your relationship with your members, and kind of what's the feedback been?
Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I think we see it a lot when it comes to, broader well-being. I think that's really where the linchpin that ties a lot of our impact work together with the business. I think what the reality is in financial services, there's big trust issues between consumers and institutions. And I think we've cultivated an interesting space where people, feel comfortable enough that they can kind of be open with what they need from us and the challenges they have. And I think the ownership structure helps that definitely. But there's kind of a community focused aspect to the advice we give and the vibe in the branches and all those sorts of things. So I think that's a good starting point. So we see, impact in the business overlapping in that respect as well. So that, that means, financial health and well-being for sure. But I think in recent years, we've come to have a broader view of what overlaps with financial health and well-being, and just an overall sense of well-being is highly tied to financial goals a lot of the time. So we're interested in developing out aspects of measurement work that will help us understand that better, partially for reporting and evaluating and telling that story, but then also partially for if we understand it better, we can manage it better and just have that another lens on our strategy and how we can move forward as a credit union.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. And a big piece of this work for First Credit Union has been, as we bring ourselves along in the journey, bringing members too. So we've done things like host zero waste workshops and open that up to employees and members, and just be really transparent and authentic about where we are in our own learning journey. There is no destination in environmental sustainability work. And so you're constantly learning new things as new information and you receive new operational data or new technology comes out, new platforms for tracking information. So we're just really sharing with our members and our employees along the way so that we're being transparent, and also we're all kind of have the opportunity to come along in the journey together. And members have really liked that. It's also provides such an amazing opportunity for members and employees to be together in a space where it's very equal. We're all learning together. So the relationship building opportunity with that has been amazing. We service rural, remote areas and small cities. So often we know each other. Everyone knows each other. We're in the same communities. And that's one of the amazing aspects of being part of a credit union is just having that really deep relationship piece with members. So surprisingly, environmental sustainability has provided another opportunity to just deepen those relationships and learn together. Yeah, so that has been very fun, actually.
Yeah, I feel like when you're doing the work and you're talking to members and you're actively involved in this, it's really easy to see the value. But we find that a lot of people struggle to quantify that value or at least explain that value to other people in organizations who might not understand why it's worth investing in, new technology to help you measure, for example, or a project or reduction efforts. And Keith, I really am sticking on to something you said about just holistic well-being and financial well-being being so multifaceted and involving all parts of the place that you live, the place that you work, the money, the health. Like, it's all connected.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking about so many of our customers who say, well, I can't get budget for this. It's an expense, it's too expensive to measure our impact or to get people on board. So I would love to hear from you both about how you've kind of navigated that challenge of wanting to invest in this and also wanting it to be worth it, quote unquote, for everybody else at the organization. Yeah, would just love to hear your perspectives on that.
That's a great question. One of the things is once you kind of dive into this work, you notice that this is actually cost saving work. So in some ways, there might be some upfront cost. I'm thinking of like recycled paper, for example, that might on the surface seem more expensive. But then when we're measuring our GHG emissions and we're doing things like buying carbon offsets, we're making a huge reduction in GHGs by doing that. And then once we're measuring on the back end, we're also saving costs and proving and reducing those emissions. So we have really good news stories, for example. But also, like, cost saving measures around using less electricity. Well, or using less paper. Paper is a huge source of emissions, actually, and that's some low hanging fruit. So if we can digitize some of our processes, that makes it better for members. It makes it better in the operational sense, and then we're actually saving a lot of paper, a lot of money on the paper usage. So that would be just a very tangible example. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of efficiency elements to it. In a lot of ways, I think it's an interesting question given the moment that we're in too as a culture. And people that work in sustainability, I think, know this well. It's there's kind of been two main ways you can move things forward in an organization. You either make the business case for sustainability, or you make the case to do this because it's the right thing to do. And they're kind of different pitches. And I found there are moments where you can use one or the other. But the use case for credit unions is a little bit different than it is for a publicly traded company, where they're not necessarily having to align with the list of ESG indicators and, appeal to indexes and ratings and things like this. But what we do have to do is provide our members and our communities with the information that they're looking for, and to provide our boards and regulators with the information that they're looking for. And I feel that in the earlier days of this work, the arguments about the business case for sustainability were a harder way to get started. I think they help once the argument's been won, and they help prioritize the types of things you want to do once you're kind of out of the gate with it. But to get started, I found the argument, that this is just the right thing to do is was kind of a way to, get people to let their guard down a little bit and open up the door to some of the business case conversations. So anyway, I think that's maybe how we got to the point where we prioritize this. And I guess if that fails, you can always point to the information that the regulators are asking for and their new focus on ESG and environmental risk, and the fact that if you don't have this information, you're not able to answer those questions. So I guess that's the practical side of my answer, I suppose. But there's ideally kind of like this cultural conversation that happens before that point. So you're not just doing it because you have to, you're doing it because, people have bought into it as part of the strategy.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think the hard part is getting started. And then once you are started measuring, you notice, oh, we're already doing a lot of great things. And there's a lot of tangible kind of low-hanging fruit opportunities here for quick wins. And then you feel good, you celebrate those quick wins, and then you get more buy-in for doing the work and pushing the work forward. Part of our work has been engaging members in this. So looking for local, maybe nonprofit, for example, in BC, we have BC Green Business who will come in and do an assessment of your brick and mortar or your home-based business, and then give you some examples of, give you an overall rating, a certificate, and then also give you a list of to-dos around, just further changes that you can make to reduce your emissions. And so they're a nonprofit, they're very affordable. It's not GHG accounting, but it's a really great way to get started. And so we've been hooking members up with that organization and sponsoring the cost of doing that work. It's just a great entry point. It's affordable. It takes an hour. It's a site visit. And it supports, it just supports the movement within BC as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think you touched on something that we obviously value, which is just this notion of accessibility and not having to do everything all at once. I think a lot of people feel really overwhelmed when they're starting on ESG in general, which is just like an absolutely giant bucket of topics to cover. And they say, well, you know what? I don't know anything, so it's easier to do nothing than something. But then they say, but we are already doing all these things. Like we already have a, procurement process that favors people who are sustainable, or we're already recycling our paper, or we already have, e-waste bins in our office. And it's kind of, that's amazing. Let us help you prove the impact of it. Let's help you quantify why that work is so valuable. So I guess I'm wondering, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but for an organization or a cheerleader at an organization who's just getting started with this and is trying to fight that battle and trying to get this started at their organization, what resources did you turn to in the past, or would you recommend to somebody who's trying to start sustainability work? And Caitlin, that program you described sounds like an incredible example, but I know that's something that people are always looking for. So if you've got other ideas, we're all ears.
Mm-hmm. I think for us, and then Keith, jump in at any time and we can kind of go back and forth on this. But for us, it was driven by our members. And then once our members had asked the question, we talked about it internally, and we saw that there was a lot of internal willingness and opportunity to engage with the subject. So just that kind of buy-in helped kind of get the ball rolling. Also just, pointing to industry trends, and ESG is not a passing trend, I would say. So leveraging those internal champions, looking to other, especially in the credit union sector where we're a cooperative financial institution and we cooperate with each other, looking to our peers in the industry. What are other folks doing? What are the kind of best practices and standards? There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So looking to peers to see what their journey was and connecting with others, that kind of like research and data gathering and information gathering from peers so that you can put together a kind of case that talks about what other folks in the industry are doing.
Yeah, I think it's not a resource. I think in my journey, the tipping point was when I stopped kind of referencing these frameworks and started talking about it in a really tangible way. I ultimately found a way to make it real for people, which kind of set the table for, a greater appetite to talk about the frameworks. But, I think for people outside of this space, the frameworks themselves have limited potential for excitement.
I'm going to write that down. That's so funny.
You can draw out the stories buried within there if you can kind of, put the technical language aside for a bit. And I think this is particularly important for credit unions because of the use case for this type of information. Like as soon as we were able to kind of articulate specifically, what issues were related to our business model and what we plan to do about them, which is why we created the Impact Lab, which is a way of creating more opportunities for more people to access fair and mainstream credit. Like our tagline is, building banking that benefits all. So it's about financial inclusion. It's about addressing gaps in community finance. It's about finding ways for people and businesses and needs to access institutional capital that don't really exist now, that are either deemed too risky or not a fit for the credit union model or whatever. So it gives us a way of kind of telling that story about what we're doing to have an impact really specifically. And that kind of opens the door to other things. So the more you can tell a tighter story that's, people can relate to and understand. Like I was at the credit union a couple of years, and then we came up with the Impact Lab and came up with some pilot tests that we were doing in the Impact Lab. I had someone on our team come up to me afterwards, like, this is the first time I understood what it is you actually do. And then it kind of opens up the door to other things. So I think, really being like, real with it and look at the early stages of it as almost like a grassroots endeavor, and just, anchoring yourself to things that people can easily get behind and easily wrap their heads around, and then using that as a platform to build other things.
Yeah, totally agree. And we just highlight the relationship piece. And also sometimes when we talk about, I've come across this where when we start talking about environmental responsibility, sometimes individuals within an organization or within the community can start to feel badly that they are maybe not doing enough. So really taking like a positive asset-based approach, like here are the things we're already doing amazingly. This is really just about data gathering and tracking, and then reduction from there. But highlighting the things that are already going well and building from there, because people want to feel successful. They want to feel like they're part of something good and that they can actually make a change and a difference. And so that's been really important to us, is just taking that a positive approach and relationship building within the context, bringing people kind of into that. Yeah, and then also looking at regulatory changes kind of coming down the pipe as well. So just kind of balancing that with also the risk associated with not doing this work, because there is, we're now in a place where there's a risk associated with not having started this work, because it's because of the regulation coming down. And
yeah, I would love to hear, maybe just more of those positive stories. So if you can both think about your sustainability and impact work over the past years, is there kind of a project or initiative that really stands out as something that was either your personal favorite to work on, or really kind of galvanize the community around the work that you do?
Well, it sounds like we're relatively early on compared to Caitlin's work, but maybe I'll start and then you can kind of carry it forward. I think a lot of the work that I've personally got value out of so far hasn't necessarily been about community engagement yet. For the longest time, I think we were, I don't know, just a bit of trepidation about, getting into environmental measurement and management and things like that. And we really wanted understanding what the base case was. And we didn't think we had a huge footprint, especially when it comes to scope 1 and 2, but we're kind of over, like, I think we're a little bit unsure of what it was going to look like when we get to scope 3. And we're in the middle of scope 3 evaluations now. But I think it's given us an understanding of, what the various levers are in the organization. I think some of the sense that we didn't have a big footprint on scope 1 and 2 were correct, but now we know. Scope 3, I think, has opened up some interesting conversations about what we do and what impact does it have, and I think we're still working through some of that. But I can see a point where, and I'd love to get to a point where we are engaging and nonprofits in our network and a bit more public with our members about this work. But I think that's an impossible bridge to cross unless you have the data in place in the first place. And we had done analysis on our own, and there was kind of some trepidation about whether we did it correctly or whether it included everything or whatever, or what, and there was no lens really into how others were doing it. So I think what I've really appreciated about the Carbonhound platform, it takes some of those questions which can stall this work behind the scenes kind of off the table, because it's kind of built into the platform, and people accept that is the case. So it makes getting off the ground. It really accelerated how quickly we can get off the ground. It took a project that we had been dabbling with for years in some way, shape, or form, and moved it materially forward in like a few months. So it has been really helpful to kind of get to this point. And I think once we have the last pieces of the puzzle in place, it's going to open up some doors to some other things as well.
Yeah, I would just say, to touch on the scopes, scope 3 has really been the meat and potatoes of where we have done a lot of our engagement work. And so that's all of those things like, paper usage or waste management, things like that. And that's really been the area that's opened up the opportunity for us to do a lot of engagement with employees and with members. But yeah, so for example, one of the really neat initiatives that we did through 2021 is we had an opportunity to renovate our flagship branch. And we had all of these building materials, some of them outdated, but still usable, that were coming out of the renovated branch and typically just go into the landfill. So we took that as an opportunity to engage folks working in that branch and just identifying, desks that weren't going to be used, technology that maybe we were going to replace, monitors, keyboards, things like this that were still of use to other folks. But even building materials, interior doors, interior windows, glass bricks, things like this. And then went out to community, in particular our nonprofit members, and just asked them if they had use for these materials, and really put some time and effort into pairing our community members, in particular our own members, but really anyone in the community who could use these materials. We were able to divert, so I don't have the number in front of me, but we diverted a lot from the landfill in that way. And again, a great relationship building opportunity, especially for the nonprofit organizations who took our desks, our old monitors, keyboards, things like that, which otherwise, again, we would have had to pay for that tippage, right? Like we would have had to pay to put that in the landfill, or taking the time internally to recycle all those IT materials. So that was a great opportunity. It was also just really fun. Like we just had a lot of fun doing it, and felt really good. And it gave us a great opportunity for good news stories around the renovation of the branch. Because of course, credit unions members are also concerned about, they wanted to know that there was a need to renovate the branch. Are we going to be fiscally responsible during that process? So it gave us a great opportunity to highlight what we were doing, and then also to put in more efficient heating systems and things like, motion censored lighting. We also installed a shower and change room for employees, and a new bike rack, and for active commuters. And we installed EV charging stations for our free for member use, actually, and then paid at a standard rate for community members. So that was a really fun project that pulled in so many pieces, so many departments, and then engaged with members in the broader community as well. We got some media coverage from that too. And yeah, just a really great opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really fun. And the whole time you were telling that story, I was just thinking, there's this whole notion that we all vote with our dollars in terms of, what we care about and what we value and what we want to support in kind of a future that we want to be a part of. And I think folks who bank with credit unions kind of live that all the way. and then being able to see that through those decisions that they've made about where they put their money, they get that return in community investment is just so cool, because it's social, it's environmental, it's like that holistic sustainability of a community that really comes through initiatives like that. So yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm not moving to the Sunshine Coast anytime soon, but maybe one day, because yeah, we don't have showers here. What's that about? Anyways, that's really amazing. I think like it's really fun to talk about things that have gone really well, and just a couple more questions. But one thing that I would love to hear about is some of the most frustrating or kind of difficult challenges that you faced in your roles to kind of move this work forward, and whether it's something that you faced as an individual or as an organization. When it comes to sustainability, what have been the biggest challenges or roadblocks?
I can start us off on that. I think it's a learning journey, right? So failing fast is important always, and we learn a lot from things. We learn, as much from things that didn't go well as from things that did go well. A couple of things that come to mind, not so much that they didn't go well, but it was just part of the journey, would be kind of flipping around on platforms a little bit as you get established. So, or tools for GHG accounting. For us, that's been one. We worked with an amazing sustainability consultant in our early days. And for our first 2 years of measuring, she was incredible. And then she had a family and chose to stop doing that work. So we moved to another platform, and moving things to a platform can be a lot of work for people, especially when we don't have our heads wrapped around what GHG accounting looks like already. We already have all this data, but we're not used to like sorting it in this way or looking at it through this lens, right? So getting kind of set up on a new platform, and it turned out that platform didn't quite work for us either. And so now we're at Carbonhound, which has been amazing, I have to say. And I'm not just saying that, it's been incredible. And so just finding the right fit for your organization. But one of the things that I would mention about Carbonhound in particular would be that we can link up, for example, our BC Hydro accounts with you. So you have access to our data, and we don't have to move all of our data. Data comes to us, then we move it to you, and then we get it back. It just goes straight to you. Also, like the platform, the web-based platform is very easy to use and navigate. So, and the customer service has been amazing. And I'm not just saying this, it's really been a bit of a game changer for us. So that's been great, but it's a challenge along the way, right? Just finding that right fit sometimes takes a little bit. What else did I want to say on that? I think also we've tried a couple of things internally, or one in particular, to where we thought it might be fun if employees measured their own personal GHG emissions. And folks didn't love that, actually. There was something about that just didn't work for people. And I think maybe, again, it's that starting from that positive place of, look at this cool thing we could do that also has a really positive impact and could actually be a cost saving measure. Just taking that kind of positive approach. Yeah, this particular initiative didn't sit well with people, so we didn't have a lot of engagement. So you just close it and say thank you and move on, right? And try new things, because there's lots of things that have gone well too. But I think just recognizing when something's not a good fit for your people, for internally, or for your members, or for your organization and your systems and structures, and just moving on quickly. And again, reaching out to fellow credit unions and asking what they're doing. Often there's a lot of great information to share, and you can get some of those kind of warnings or suggestions for pivots from folks who are a little further down the road.
Kind of a like thematically similar answer, I think. Like, the things that I would have done differently in retrospect seem to all be related to, I think people graduate, like moving too quickly and not taking the time to bring people with you. So I think like there's a natural inclination for the people in these roles to want to have an impact right away and to move urgently towards that. That's kind of what draws us to the work in the first place. And I think there's, a propensity in companies to, have people in those roles kind of, just put them in a box, go work on it, and come back and report to us when it's ready. I think both of those things kind of create a kind of risky scenario, which is, you start working on things that the organization is not ready for, or that lands flat when, it does get introduced, which, sets the whole agenda back, significantly. So I think there's some truth to the adage of, go slow to go fast, even though it seems counterintuitive and kind of against our nature. There's a lot of value into taking the time to bring people along with you and making sure it's not just, a person or an executive team or a couple of board members or whatever, that it's kind of well understood and as broad a section of the organization as possible. I think that's probably somewhere where we could have, done better. And I think it's something we'll probably focus on improving in the next phase.
Live and learn. And I think, especially when you're just starting this work, one of the things that's worked really well for us is just identifying champions within the organization and throughout the organization, throughout departments, and really kind of tapping into their personal passion for the work, and as opposed to volunteering people that now they are doing this whole new thing. Because it may be, and it was for us, that for the first few years, this work can happen off the sides of desks of folks. And so just being kind of cognizant of whose desk that is happening off the side of, while you start to kind of thread things through the organization and really embed it in departments like finance, things like that. So identifying those champions, giving them an operation or an opportunity to get involved, and to do some of that strategy building. Excuse me. And then you have supporters planted throughout the organization who, even in terms of having conversations around the water cooler or things like that, right, can just kind of champion that work that's happening and tapping into fun, because often we're looking for something fun to do in our work. We want a little side gig if it's fun and enjoyable, right? And then that kind of builds the buy-in and really kind of builds the momentum through the organization. Because there's always going to be people who feel personally engaged and interested in this work, and then others who don't, and that's completely okay. And that will never not be the case, I don't think. So really, like, leveraging your champions. Yeah,
I think that's very true. It's when you're working in this space, and I came to DUCA and I was kind of doing a somewhat ESG related consulting role. And I was in that world all the time. And I think one of the things when you kind of change environments that, it was really telling, and I had to adjust to it in a big way, was that, a lot of these things that you kind of live and breathe and talk to people about all the time are really new to, a lot of your audience. Like, they're maybe peripherally aware of it or maybe not aware of it at all. And they certainly aren't into the weeds, that you don't realize you're talking in the weeds about it, but you are until you talk to someone that it's new to, and the newness can be good. It can resonate with people right away. It can also be threatening. It can also be perceived as a risk, and you just got to understand that is the case, and you're going to get those spectrum of reactions, and taking the time to actually manage those relationships is really important.
Yeah, that is such a good point that I want to highlight too, where just sometimes this work, it sounds big and scary. GHG accounting, for example, it kind of sounds like this whole new thing that we're going to do, but it's data that we already have. So creating opportunities to have conversations about what that work actually looks like and have people engage with that. I get that a lot in our community funding as well. It sounds so easy to give out money. It must be so easy to give money away. It's it's quite a tricky process actually, and it takes a lot of thinking and strategizing. So we created environmental, once we had kind of buy-in from our leadership on moving forward for this work, and B Corp was a big piece of this, just recognizing that the ESG landscape, really within all sectors, but definitely in the credit union sector, this was not a passing trend. This is something we need to really start focusing on, and it's something that our members are asking about. We moved into a B Corp certification process, and then from there really looked at, okay, how can we authentically engage people from across the organization? What does that look like? We started an employee resource group and brought people in from all different corners and levels of the organization, including having a VP sit on that committee, and just kind of got to work with those individuals from across the organization. And that was huge. That was kind of the tipping point. And then people could really take on projects that they felt personally engaged with, for example, like active commuting, if they wanted to do a go by bike week at work, or just start kind of advocating in their own area of interest. That was great. And then of course that group has morphed a lot over the years just to meet the needs, because the landscape of ESG changes, your organization changes. We've had merges. Our ESG, our emissions have gone up and down depending on the context, right? Of course, you merge, you have 3 new branches, your emissions are going to go up. So just that group has been flexible and has changed in members depending on their capacity, things like that. So it's in constant flux, which is quite fun, but a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, I really appreciate being honest that it is a team project, and it kind of has to be. It can feel really lonely if you're the only person working on this at an organization, but it's not going to be successful if you are actually the only person who cares about it. And a lot of people that we work with, they find themselves in this position where they're fighting so hard every day for somebody else to listen and somebody else to care, but they're so in the weeds of the work that they don't engage with the rest of their employees or their colleagues. And then at the end of the year, it's like, okay, here's my report, here's a deliverable, but nobody else has really understood why it's important along the way. So I think for us, it's also just like helping people get out of the reporting slog and into actually engaging with the rest of their company and kind of taking action. So definitely appreciate that message, because we hear ya.
And I think scope 3 is the magic. That's where all the fun happens. That's where the engagement opportunities are. And often that's where the real reduction opportunities are. Like, we reduced our emissions by 25% in 2023, and that was all scope 3.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so fun. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It is, because it inherently touches every part of the company. You have to talk to procurement and facilities and everyone. So amazing. Okay, well, I just have one more question for the two of you, and I really just want to understand what you're most excited about moving forward, because as you said, it's kind of this ongoing journey, and there's always things that you're working on based on what the priorities are and what's going on. So what's one thing in sustainability or climate or even impact in general that you're really excited about for this year?
I think for me, it's related to our Carbonhound work, it's getting into financed emissions. I think that's exciting, and the impact that our lending decisions and capital is having outside of the business is super exciting. The other piece is, and we haven't talked about it a lot, but I think there's a really interesting aspect to the credit union sector where credit unions are collaborating with each other. So, collaborating with other institutions and the possibilities that opens up has become a big part of what we do in the Impact Lab. And I could see it being a big part of what we do corporately as well. And I think there's tons of potential to work together as a system to kind of build out these functions and find new ways for this information to be used, and how it drives innovation and strategy, I think is is really cool. So I think that's a unique aspect to our industry that I kind of see kind of pop up its head in lots of different ways, and it's become a bigger part of our business in the Impact Lab with our escalator loan collaboration, and I could see other opportunities for that as well. So I'm excited about those things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I love that the credit unions cooperate together. It's amazing. I've had some really great experiences working with CCUA in their National ESG committee and just sharing information and commiserating a little bit and celebrating each other and learning from each other's lessons. That's been amazing. Definitely for us moving forward 2025 into 2026, really looking at those financed emissions piece. That's rolling out a bit slower in British Columbia than it is in, say, Ontario. So I think we're a little bit further behind, which in some ways is great because we can learn from our peers in those provinces. And so that's really what we're looking at. And of course, that will probably shift our environmental sustainability resource group too at First Credit Union. So just looking at involving folks from risk department, for example, and kind of thinking about and strategizing how will we look at the financed emissions piece. And then of course, we still have our operational emissions piece, which has a component of employee and member engagement. So it starts to kind of be two buckets at this point, and just looking at how we want to manage that and move forward. And totally agree, Keith. Lots of exciting opportunities looking at financed emissions, and it's just a whole new world. So this landscape is always changing, which can be fun and frustrating, but it means it's never boring. There's always something new to think about. And we were really excited to sign on with Carbonhound and just know that that you all were working and educating yourselves and creating supports for the financed emissions piece. Because for me, that's a bit big and scary. So, but yeah, it'll be great work, and it'll require, another level of sophistication in our internal teams and systems and some upskilling. So that's always a fun opportunity.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I really can't thank both of you enough for honestly just thinking about this and giving the time to talk about it. It's really, really, really important work, as you both know, but it's way more valuable when we get to share that with other people who might not see it. And I think the through line for me is just how important community is and doing this together, because you can't do it alone and you shouldn't. And cross like inter-organizational collaboration with your colleagues, but importantly across the industry, and even outside of it through the whole B Corp community and our community as well. It's just like we can only do this together, and we have to do it together if we want to do it faster. Because no reinventing of any wheels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's all the questions that I had. I'm happy to let folks ask any questions just in the chat here, but if you leave them in the chat, we'll also answer them in afterwards. I'll send an email with the recording. So is there anything else that either of you wanted to share just about your work at your organizations and about sustainability before we sign off?
Just to say thanks for having us and for having me. And it's really exciting work. It can be really cup filling work. There's always something new to learn, which I love about this work. And it feels good. It feels good to engage people in it and to work collaboratively. And I'm just really grateful to have been able to work in ESG for quite a while, and I love it. And I wish everybody the best of luck on their journeys. And I'm certainly always open to having conversations with folks. It again is so great to talk to someone who's even just a little further ahead in the journey, to get a sense of best practices or fast fails, things like that. So I'm always open to that conversation. And thanks again for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity as well. And I guess I would end on an invitation. I mentioned collaboration and we work with a couple of other credit unions and Kindred Credit Union and Your Neighborhood Credit Union in Ontario, and hopefully going to be announcing some more in other places in our escalator loan pilot, which isn't necessarily environmentally related, but it's a great example of collaboration in the sector. So if there's other credit unions on the call that want to, explore, have an idea for collaboration or want to know more about the escalator loan pilot, I'm all ears and open to talking with anyone from the sector, and would love to include more credit unions in the work.
Awesome. Okay, thank you both so much. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining. We'll send the recording afterwards. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much.